Steeler Nation, we are back for another great week of episodes on the one and only The Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. I am Jay York Football. Alongside me, as always, mic'd up Sports One. And give me one word about that Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl. Just sum it up. One word. You know, we always do the one words over at The Sick Podcast.
Unexpected. I'll go with that. I was going to say boring, but, football is never boring to me. And at least there were a lot of points. We're talking about worst Super Bowls I have seen, and I think it was probably Rams-Patriots. That was like 13-3 a handful of years back. And that was incredibly boring. I wouldn't put this in the boring category, but I didn't expect an ass kicking. And certainly if there was an ass kicking, it to be done by the Eagles over the Chiefs. So I probably gave you 100 words there, but unexpected is the one if I had to go with one.
Yeah, I would say shocked myself. I thought that the Eagles could pull it out, but I never bet against Patrick Mahomes. And, man, it was just – yeah, it was atrocious. It was bad. That was not a good Super Bowl from top to bottom. But, I mean, congrats to the Eagles. It's a new season. And our guest that we have on, we're going to be talking some draft. We bring on the best in the biz. So, Jimmy, let's take it to the end zone.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Harris Smith shields. Flacco. Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Yeah, before we start, I'd be remiss not to wish you a happy belated 35th birthday. 35, man, looks so good. So we've been doing it a long time. We're getting old over here, but the flow and is still there. We know you like to keep in shape. But listen, man, obviously it's the best time of year to some. Now that the season has ended, we can focus on the NFL draft. And who better to help us than this guy? You can find him at 32 Beat Writers. He's at TJ Wengert on Twitter. It is none other than our guy, TJ Wengert. What's going on, man?
Hey, guys. Appreciate you guys having me on. I'm really excited to talk some ball with y'all.
Definitely.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And listen, of course, all eyes have been on the draft now for Steelers fans for, a little over a month since the playoff elimination, of course. And the most talked about position probably in sports is the quarterback position, naturally, as you're well aware. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, so on and so forth. We have beat a dead horse with those two. So I think a lot of our listeners might be curious about this class. And the Steelers are picking at 21, so you assume obviously they're going to miss out on the Shador and Cam Wards of the world. But are there any other guys worth being selected around that spot? And just tell me about some of the other guys.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm interested to hear y'all's Fields versus Russ. I feel like every day it changes just a little bit within the Steelers landscape. I've kind of always been on the Field side of that, but I am curious to see where that kind of goes the rest of the discourse this offseason. But when it comes to the draft, it's funny, picking a 21, I think that's about where I'm going to have Cam Ward. He might be a few spots higher than that. In my overall big board, he's going to go a lot higher than that, but just stacking guys in this entire class, Ward's probably going to end up being somewhere in that 15 to 20 range, if I had to guess. And Shador is going to be, I don't know, I might put him in at number 32 just so I could say, I had him in the first round. Somewhere in that ballpark, though. So it's interesting when you look at the big board, Steelers should be in a good spot. But it's a QB needy, league, man. And there's two teams right there inside the, 3 and 6 that feel like great fits for Cam and Shador. And then there's plenty of other teams that are just chomping at the bit to potentially get one of these guys. It's not the best quarterback class. And then you get to day 2. And it feels like possibilities could be potentially endless for the Steelers there. I have a mock coming out this week for 32 Beat Writers where I have the Steelers going with one of those guys in the 3rd round. And I think it's certainly a possibility, right? Will Howard from Ohio State. Obviously, Chip Kelly goes to the Las Vegas Raiders, so they're kind of a hot Will Howard landing spot right now for mocks, especially if they don't go Shador. Tyler Shuck, got to see him at the Senior Bowl. Thought he really looked the part of an NFL starter. He's on the older side, but you're getting a guy with pretty good mobility for his size, and he's got a big arm. And for an Arthur Smith, play action, under center heavy offense, he makes a lot of sense there as well. So those are a couple of the guys that I'm they feel like Arthur Smith fits specifically. but they kind of feel like options that could be there for the Steelers on day 2. Don't want to rule out Jalen Milroe if they don't go the Justin Fields route. He's definitely kind of taken a little bit of a falling in my, quarterback rankings. Just wasn't the best week for him at the Senior Bowl. And then guys like Jackson Dart, he's a tough one to eval. I could see a world where the Steelers do go that direction in the second round. It wouldn't shock me. But right now I think he's going to go in the second. He might go before, honestly, the Steelers second round pick, if I'm honest. That could be another team that's like the Browns right there at the top of the second round. Are they feeling the risk appetite on Jackson Dart? So we'll see if he's there for Pittsburgh in the second round. If he is, there's probably conversations about it. If not, I really do like, Tyler Shook in the third round. To me, feels like a good fit. And if you're going to start the year with Fields, Shook behind him, kind of gives you the option to go either way. Kind of like what they did this year with, one way to win games with Fields and another way to win with Russ. And they could do the same thing kind of next year.
Yeah, your points are why I'm very pro Justin Fields, because it's not a great quarterback class, right? So, it may be a bit of a blessing in disguise to be picking 21st overall. And if you're going to go with a guy who has some upside, who we still probably don't know his full potential because he was with the Bears, who, were a disaster, why not go with Fields, who to me kind of still feels like a draft pick, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, he's one of the younger guys that's going to be on the free agent market. Also, not a great year to go sign a guy in free agency, right? I think there was some Sam Darnold love, and then he played the last 2 games of his season with the Vikings, and then proceeded to lose a lot of money off of that. But no, I think you're spot on, and I've been kind of in the field side of it because I could see a world, and this is just kind of like the rabbit hole I've been putting myself into when thinking about Steelers mocks. I think if you're the Steelers, you bring back Fields, 2-year contract, maybe a third year if you can get that in there. Probably for 15, 20 million a year, I would guess. Let's just say 15. That's a very cheap starting quarterback option. You can build out the rest of this roster with that money and with those savings. You trade for Cooper Kupp in the 4th round, you pay half the salary, the Rams pay half that salary. Then you're looking at a really good corner class there at 21, and that's where I'm jumping at the bit to get in this year's class. Right there at 21, that's where the value starts to really peak for me. And honestly, I think Pittsburgh with Fields, if they can sign 2 DBs, draft 2 DBs, with our pass rush, I think there's enough games where the Steelers can win in a race to 20. And with Fields, I think you could be able to do that. And I think that would really be the mission statement. Hey, get to 20 points. That should be enough for us to win week in and week out.
Yeah, Fields has a lot of the qualities that Jalen Hurts does. No question about it. Bigger guy, can run. Obviously, he has not as polished, but I think that's a bit of a blueprint right there. We saw this past Sunday, the Super Bowl. I'll ask one more question. Throw it back to Jordan. Maybe we'll get back into quarterbacks at some point. But we've seen a lot of mock drafts centered around the Steelers that have them taking a defensive lineman in the first. Sure. You have Cam Hayward, who's aging, who's still excellent. Keanu Benton looks like he's going to be pretty good, but definitely another need there, especially the way they were just run over by guys like Derrick Henry. What are you hearing about this class? Apparently, it's just loaded.
Oh, yeah. My top 100 is going to be defensive line intensive. And it feels like every day goes by, I find a new guy that I'm like, well, hold on. Why is anybody talking about this dude? Hold on. This guy's pretty good. He should definitely go in the 3rd round. So, the top 100, interior defensive line and edge. And I don't know if the Steelers need to tap into the edge well, especially if Herbig's going to continue to kind of play on the edge. But, dude, I think this is a great year to get some extra IDL depth, right? You're going to move on from Larry Ogunjobi, I would assume, save $8 million in cap. Could you get Darius Alexander in the 2nd round? I think that's a great fit. Honestly, to me, Darius Alexander in the 2nd round or Milton Williams in free agency, if they're willing to spend the money on Milton, he's going to get a bag. But he, to me, kind of screams very Steelers, what they could be looking for. Or you go Darius Alexander, who kicked butt at all 4 defensive line spots, super aggressive with great hand speed, violent hands, and also great initial first step. So he's a guy that could just kind of be a glue piece for the Steelers. Oh, Cam Hayward's banged up. He's going to fill in there. Oh, Keanu Benton, we can't get him in for whatever reason. He fills in there. So kind of a jack of all trades guy. But also, Tyleik Williams is an interior defensive lineman who, if you were I could use some Casey Hampton on the Steelers team, it's going to be hard not to get fired up while watching Tyleik Williams. Kenneth Grant, 340 pounds, number 2 on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. That's a nose tackle that certainly comes with a lot of intrigue. So, honestly, the Steelers could get to 21, and especially if they're okay with the quarterback situation, they might just go BPA, and there's a good chance this year that's a defensive lineman. Any other guys, any other names that y'all heard that you feel like are Steelers guys?
Well, my next
position.
Yeah, my next segue is arguably, we need help. You touched on it lightly when you were talking to Mike. Receiver, talk about some of the guys that stick out to you that could be available when the Steelers pick, or in the later rounds, even some sleepers.
Yeah, and I mean, receivers kind of become this position where, the Steelers drafted really well outside of the first round. So, maybe this is the year they do go first round, like Luther Burden, wide receiver from Missouri. Sorry, I got to get better about saying what schools these guys come from. And he's kind of that Arthur Smith yards after the catch machine that totally, think of Cordero Patterson, his usage, and then a better receiver. You could see how Arthur Smith would love the idea of working with that guy. Emeka Egbuka, it kind of feels like you'd be moving on from Roman Wilson at that point. I don't know what the deal is there, not playing a third round guy. But, if you go Emeka Egbuka, you're willing to move and, take the loss on Wilson. Inside out flexibility, good blocker, just does a lot of little things right. Matthew Golden, smooth route runner, definitely more sudden, more quick than I would say fast. To me, he looks like he's probably a little bit on the lower side of 4.4 speed, probably 4.46, 4.47 if I had to guess right now. But a great route runner with really good hands, great body, mid-air contortion ability. But then you get down to the depth here. Hold on, let's pull up some of the wide receiver notes. You get further on in this draft, and it just comes down to what flavor you're looking for, and that's kind of a hard thing to peg for the Steelers because with Russell Wilson, it's 50-50 ball winners. But it's what is that going to look like with a different guy under center? So those are some of the first-round guys I definitely like. Let's see.
Right?
I think both the Iowa State guys could be interesting. Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins. I like both those guys. They looked good at the Senior Bowl. Xavier Restrepo, I like AU Manor, a couple of day 2 guys there. It just comes down to what flavor they're looking for, and are they really ready to move on from Roman Wilson? Because if so, it opens up the door. If you're trying to figure out a world where he makes sense on top of that, it gets a little bit of a slimmer picking. The other thing to take into account is Arthur Smith does not like using 3 receiver sets that much. On an NFL basis, he just uses it at a fewer rate than anybody else. So is this team content with just getting Cooper Kupp for a 4th, or Christian Kirk for a 4th, or something like that, and just saying, hey, that plus George Pickens, that's all we need. So I ultimately think that might be the route they go, and then they go somewhere defense in the first round. That would be my potential lean right now.
Yeah, I like everything you're saying, TJ. Are you sure you're not a Steelers fan?
Dude, that's what I'm saying. And it's sometimes it's hard, right? Because especially for when it's your own team, you don't notice the hopium kind of kicking in.
Yeah.
But when it's every other team in the comments and they're telling you how you're stupid, you're like, shut up. You're just saying that because you're a Seahawks fan or whatever.
Yeah, we've been there. We know that. We know exactly what you're saying. Before I throw it back over to Mike, if the Steelers let Najee Harris walk, looks like that's going to happen. Talk about some of the running backs in this class coming up and where you could see the Steelers kind of, taking a shot. Obviously, everything's up in the air right now. The Super Bowl's just over, but just obviously, hypothetically speaking, just give us where you could see the best fit for some of these guys.
Yeah. I mean, I almost think I don't say you have to let go of Najee, but it's such a good running back class that legitimately, if there's going to be 30 plus guys drafted at that position. So if you're any of these 32 NFL teams, you do yourself a disservice not drafting a guy. To me, this year's edge group, this year's running back class, that 6th round flyer you normally take and you kind of discard it. Maybe they're a practice squad guy.
Yeah.
Those positions specifically this year, hold on, let me just see what this guy can do in camp. And I think that's kind of the luxury the Steelers have. And like I said, if you can sign 2 DBs, draft 2 DBs, I think you're in a good spot defensively. So moving on from Najee, not paying that $10 million, I think opens up that possibility. And in turn, dude, it could be Amari and Hampton at 21 if they want to go back that first round. I think Najee might kind of scare them off that route. But even if you get into the 2nd round and it's someone like, I don't know, Quinshaw Judkins who can make it there, Travion Henderson, specifically kind of looking at downhill runners to complement Jalen Warren. There's a ton of these guys in the 3 to 5 range that are really exciting fits. Damian Martinez from Miami, I like a ton. Ollie Gordon's a really fun player, looked really spry at the Senior Bowl. Cam Scattaboo became college football. If you were a college football fan, he became America's favorite player. Yeah. RJ Harvey, DJ Giddens in the 5th or 6th round from
who stood out to you the most? That kind of was under the radar, but when you were at the Senior Bowl, who was man, this guy is going to make some noise.
Yeah, honestly, running backs it's kind of tough because
I'm just speaking as a whole. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. Biggest winner, I'll say Gray Zabel. I think the Steelers they ate their vegetables last year with 3 offensive line picks, so I don't think they'll be in the Zabel market. But at the same time, let's have an honest conversation. I really thought about this for my next mock. If there's a good tackle at 21, do you think about it? Do you just give up on Broderick Jones here? And maybe that's the conversation.
Yeah, I mean,
we're talking O-line. Like, do you go Josh Connolly? He won best offensive line during the practice, voted on by the players. Do you just say, hey, Broderick Jones, sorry, it's just not going to work out. We'll move on, get a fifth for him maybe in exchange?
Hasn't been too good of a start, to say the least. So,
the only thing that's worse than making a mistake is trying to shoehorn that mistake into being a win, right? So I almost do wonder if that's an option there at 21, because there's a couple guys that seem to fall right into that range.
I don't hate it.
Are good values. Yeah.
They have screwed up the situation, and they're going to give him at least one more year because
I think that's fair.
His natural position of left tackle. You know, he played at right tackle his rookie season, and then they planned to put him at left tackle last year.
Chronic injury. Yep.
Yeah, and you're still stuck with him. But I mean, he's been a terrible right tackle, no question. But I think it's at least that caveat, that asterisk, right? That's going to say, hey, at least let's give him one more year left.
Yeah, exactly. Give him a year left, and let's see what both of these guys look like on the field. Right? Can we see a world where Broderick Jones and Falatano are a tackle tandem? It's hard to do that when you only have one of them on the field at the same time. So I think you're right. They'll probably give him one more year, but oof, that's hey, at least Myles Garrett's gonna be out of the division. You know, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Would be helpful. It would be nice if we could say the same thing about Derrick Henry, but that's not happening. I mean, speaking of running backs, you just hit on it. You know, we'll move past this, but I was looking at some rankings today, and somebody had like Devin Neal at 13th, and I was like, is this class that deep that a guy like Devin Neal is 13th? Caleb Johnson was like 7th. I mean, it's a perfect class to get a guy in like the 3rd or 4th round. So I'm opposed to 21.
100%. Devin Neal right now is my RB8. I feel like I'm the high man on Devin. Brashard Smith from SMU is my RB7. Dylan Sampson, another guy I should have thrown out there. You want to talk about big playability while also being a bowling ball between the tackles? He could easily be the guy, and he's kind of been. He might run the fastest 40 of any of these running backs as well. So throwing that out there, Sampson in the 3rd round, if he's there for the Steelers, that's a great Najee Harris replacement. So like, honestly, like options aplenty, and I almost wonder if they play the game, they play the board more or less. And they're like, you know what? We could get a guy now, but we like these other 4 guys who are still available. We'll see next round. And then we'll assess it the next round after that. And they just kind of play the board.
We're hanging out with TJ Wengert here on the Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy, NFL Draft Analyst, and a lot more. I want to talk about a player who maybe is a bit overrated right now. And nobody specific. I'm asking you, who are guys a little too high on? I know you already touched on the quarterbacks, but is there somebody – you know, that sticks out, a guy or two that you don't have as high as the consensus?
That's a great question. You know what?
You know, is there
yeah, there's 2 that kind of come to mind, and I like the players. I'm just not necessarily there with first round hype. And some of this, I still need to like update the big board. A couple of these guys after the Senior Bowl probably going to move up a little bit. But Derek Harmon, to me, like, thinking about him for the Steelers at 21 could be interesting, but he's just kind of a 3-tech, you know, kind of a later breakout in college, lost 10 pounds going from Michigan State to Oregon, and now he puts it together. He's a good player, and I could see where he can win in a variety of ways, and he could be a solid player at the next level. But I'm not sure I'm there with the first round hype. Again, the Steelers pick at 21, so it's like a little bit on the later side. I could see a world where it makes some sense to them. But like if you're the Dolphins at 13 and you're looking to replace Christian Wilkins, to me, that's like way too rich for me for, you know, Derek Harmon. And then, you know, JT Tuimoloau had a great college football playoff. I am just personally more of a Jack Sawyer guy. And like, honestly, I think Tyleik Williams is the best of that bunch. I think Tuimoloau is a good, solid player, wins with arm length, wins with power. And there's a place for that. But without like special athleticism, I do wonder what that ceiling is. So again, if you're the Lions at the back of the first round, do you really care? Or do you just want like a guy who can contribute? That's a question they need to answer. But if you're hunting for upside, I'm not entirely sure he's my guy either, too. So just a couple of guys there. You know, I got Quinshon Judkins behind Trayvon Henderson, which I feel a little hot takey for at least like casuals in the space. You know, draft pundits, it kind of feels like that might be a little more chalk. So, yeah, those are kind of some of the guys that immediately come to mind. Again, good football players. I just don't know, specifically with those 2 D linemen, I don't know if I'm first round in love with them just yet.
If there was a classic all-aura Steelers draft, it's Jack Sawyer and Cam Scatterman. That's for sure.
100%. Who else can you throw in that mix? I feel like there's a couple of Yeah, those are good shouts. Honestly, some of the tight ends too. If we didn't need one too, I think a couple of those guys could kind of fit that bill. Some of the tackles too. Yeah, there's definitely some all Steeler energy in this class.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, we really appreciate your time. This has been a great episode. Why don't you tell all of our viewers what you have coming up and where they can find you? And we'll definitely have to have you back on the pod again soon.
Oh, dude, man, happy to talk Steelers anytime. You know, you guys are actually serving as like a release. My girlfriend doesn't have to hear this tangent I was going to go on now. So you guys have filled that void in my life. I appreciate that. Yeah, you can follow my work. You can follow my work over at 32 Beat Writers. We got a really big Twitter following. That's where kind of most people know us from, especially in the off season. We're all killer, no filler. It's no clickbait. We're not an aggregator account that way. We're just literally curating beat writer content so you know everything you need to know throughout the offseason for fantasy football, and then with me coming on board for the NFL draft. So that's where my mock drafts, my big board will be coming out officially here in the next few weeks. I have a mock, like I said, coming out at the end of this week. So yeah, definitely give me a follow and check out all the stuff at 32 Beat Writers.
So awesome. Before we get you out of here, we'll leave on this note. Who are the Steelers taking?
That's too soon.
At 21. I think it's going to end up being a corner.
This is the way too early pick. You don't have to live or die by this. This is just why we have you on here.
Yeah, let's go with cornerback from Notre Dame, Ben Morrison. If the medical clears, I like Ben Morrison as a complement opposite of JPJ. If not him, Azareye'h Thomas, cornerback from Florida State. I think it's going to be one of those two guys.
There you have it.
I like
it. TJ. Really appreciate your time. Keep up the great work, and we'll definitely do it again. All right?
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ.
Man, it's incredible how the calendars turn right after the Super Bowl.
You
have multiple seasons in the NFL. You have the actual regular season, then you have free agency, and then you have the draft and preseason, obviously. And like they all have these levels of hype. And it's funny because I feel like there used to be a lot of separation in between, and now it's like the draft is as exciting as the regular season. And see people are, taking off work to scroll Twitter and schedule release and all this, stuff the NFL has created into their own huge event. So I can't wait, man. It's going to be fun. We're going to have prospects on and, more great analysts. So good stuff, JY.
Yeah, that was like, again, one of those shows where he's just rattling off guys. And I'm like, man, this guy, he just knows his stuff. And I always love these episodes. And I know our viewers will as well. So we appreciate. We'll be back at the end of the week with another great guest. Just going on. And hopefully the Steelers can get it together. Because, man, a lot of question marks going into this offseason. As always, though, as of late, unfortunately. But we're still here, 365. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. The Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. I'm Jay York Football, Mic'd Up Sports One, signing out. Jimmy, it's time to shut her down.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.